Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. To halt this offensive buildup, all ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back.
The Soviet gamble didn't work, as they really were still enormously inferior to the United States in nuclear weapons. The American Navy blockaded Cuba, the Russians backed down, and their missiles in Cuba never became operational. Instead, they were forced to withdraw them.
The United States humbled the Russians in the early 60s over the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Russians swore that would never happen to them again. So they went on a big arms-building kick, and they have achieved somewhat near parity with the United States, whatever that term means.
I don't think that the Cuban crisis influenced in any way the development of strategic forces, of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Why? Because by this time, 1962, we had ballistic missiles, and so did the Americans.
By the middle 60s, Russian strategic forces had the ability to reach out from the Soviet homeland itself and devastate the entire United States. But they did not have the ability to stop the U.S. from striking back. The era of mutual deterrence had arrived.
Basically, what's been happening since World War II is that if you look at it from the American perspective, what you find is that immediately after the war, we were invulnerable. A decade later, we were no longer completely invulnerable. The Russians could have hit us then with a few atomic bombs, produced a few million casualties. 10 years after that, they were in a position to produce tens of millions of casualties. Today, they're in a position to just simply wipe us out quantitatively. And there is no defense against that. All you can do is deter that from happening by threatening an unacceptable revenge. But you can't stop it from happening.
In a curious way, the arrival of mutual deterrence made both sides believe that a nuclear war was less likely, as if nobody would deliberately start a war in which they were bound to be destroyed. You can still find the old fallout shelters scattered around America's big cities, but it's 15 years now since anybody paid much attention to them. Partly it was because the peaceful outcome of the Cuban crisis convinced the public that both sides knew how to control the risks. Nuclear war really did seem less likely. So in all the basements and underground parking garages that had been turned into makeshift shelters in the 50s, the emergency food and medical supplies gradually moldered away. In any case, by the mid-60s, the U.S. government no longer worried about shelters. American strategic theory for a while actually held that it was not only practically impossible to protect the civilian population in a nuclear war, but that it was wrong and dangerous even to try. Nuclear war would only be unthinkable if the people on each side were helpless hostages to the other side's nuclear weapons. The doctrine of mutual assured destruction, MAD for short.
But it only seems mad if you're outside the system that's dedicated to making the future safe for nuclear war. If you work inside the system, like these young men at a U.S. Air Force missile base near Knob Noster, Missouri, it all seems perfectly logical.
Okay, let's go to the missile launch checklist. I'm there. At step 1, we need to insert the launch keys. Let's go get them.
6 or 8 times a month, they sit deep underground in their silos for 24 hours, waiting for the order to launch their missiles. And once a month, they simulate going to war.
And insert the keys and strap into each chair. My key is inserted.
No detail is forgotten, right down to strapping themselves into the chairs so they won't be thrown away from their control panels by the shock if Russian nuclear weapons explode overhead.
I'm strapped in. And I am also. Step 1 is accomplished. Check. And a PLCA is required. 2 through 8. 2 and 3 are not required. I agree. PLCA launch option, required number. Number's in.
In one sense, these men who control the missiles of Strategic Air Command are today's real frontline soldiers. Yet I doubt that Alexander or Napoleon or even General George Patton would have thought they were soldiers at all. They don't use personal weapons, and they would never lay eyes on the enemies they kill. They take their orders from machines, and they pass them on to other machines.
Program select switch.
In fact, their job, which lies at the very heart of today's military strategy, differs in no significant respect, apart from its possible consequences, from that of the duty engineer at a hydroelectric power station.
The enable switch is enabled. This time the command is being transmitted to all missiles in the squadron.
And let's wait for indications.
Okay.
When you're waiting for indications, what does that mean?
The enable command has been sent out. However, we are waiting for that alarm number 2 to notify us that the missiles have accepted the command.
Okay, and I've got sorties enabling.
Check.
So we're ready for step 35. Keep turning to commit time.
Roger.
And I show us in a good window, so let's go ahead and commit.
Okay, we'll commit. We'll simultaneously rotate both keys, and this will send out the launch commands to the missiles to allow them to launch.
Ready on my mark?
I'm ready.
3, 2, 1. Mark. Hold it for 5 seconds.
This is the way the world will end.
And release.
I show key turn is accomplished.
And I've got another alarm to let us know that the launch command went through.
Check.
Automatic from there on?
At that point, we're hoping that another crew within the squadron is going to be turning keys the same way that we did. It takes 2 crews turning keys at the same time to actually launch the missiles. We work on a 2-vote system, so the one vote will send the launch command. The missiles will wait for a second launch vote from another launch control center before they will actually launch. After that, it's automatic.
How would you feel if you ever had to do it for real?
Well, we're trained so highly in our recurring training that we take every month in simulators like this, so that if we actually had to do it, it would be an almost automatic thing.
You wouldn't be thinking about it at the time?
There wouldn't be time for any reflection until after we turned the keys and waited for the indications.
Would there be reflection then, do you think?
I should think so, yes.
Do you think it would bother you to turn keys for real?
No, it wouldn't. It's, as Mike said earlier, my commander, it's automatic, kind of a reflex. You really don't have time to think about it.
To be fair, young men in missile silos are not paid to think about it. But the senior officers and civilians who are haven't always been ruled by logic either. For one thing, practically every branch of the U.S. forces has tried to get into the strategic nuclear business because that's the big league.
Officer of the deck, man battle station's missile.
Man battle station's missile, aye, sir. Man battle station's missile.
Herbert York has been in on the resulting battle almost from the start.
Yeah, in the immediate post-war years, the Army was developing rockets, and the Air Force was thinking about long-range delivery systems, but was focusing on airplanes and cruise missiles, winged cruise missiles. And so the Army got the jump on the Air Force with respect to these developments. After the invention of the hydrogen bomb, it became evident to the Air Force that long-range rockets probably were the optimum way to deliver them, or at least a very good way, competitive with airplanes. And so they immediately initiated long-range rocket programs of their own. So this led to a head-on competition between the Army and the Air Force. The Navy also came to believe that the delivery of thermonuclear weapons was somehow the wave of the future. And so the Polaris submarine system was invented and pushed as